What is up, ladies and gentlemen and speedsters all round? Welcome to my breakdown and review of The Flash Season 6 Episode 17. And I have to say, right off the bat, that was probably one of the best episodes, if not the best, of the season so far. Granted that not everything, I'm not saying every minute throughout was fantastic, but really that was an all-round decent episode with a lot of drama, a lot of tension, a lot of reveals, a lot of, just everything kind of really coming to fruition now with obviously the ending with Ava McCulloch coming out as the Mira mistress, if you will, and I just feel like everything, despite the show ending, or this season ending in just a couple of episodes time, really set up for some excitement as well, considering that we're getting very close to the artificial speed force. But enough of that, let's actually get into this breakdown, guys. But if you go on to enjoy this video, please hit that like button. It really does show your support for the channel. And of course, make sure you're subscribed with the notification bell on so you never miss out on a future video just like this. So let's start with the beginning of that episode, which was of course them hitting the big bang for the artificial speed force, which, as Cisco put it, was based solely off the teachings from Eobard Thawne. This was actually a really cool moment and a really interesting way to start off the episode. I love that little slow-mo effect from the coffee in the room as we had that little kind of speed force energy ball running around like a hamster in a cage. However, it didn't work, and I also thought the issue with this, I don't know if it's not necessarily an issue, but with creating this artificial speed force, I don't know how it's exactly going to go down. Is a lightning bolt going to come off of that little kind of device they have and hit Barry, and in so doing creating the new speed force, which is tied to him? But with that logic, they could, as of when they're successful, they could apply that experiment to another person, and another person, and another person. Like Cisco could become a speedster, Ralph, anyone. I don't know. Maybe they're going to think of something like that. It's just something that popped in my head. I'm not really picking on it. It's just now that they can create an artificial speed force, or as of when they can successfully do it, they can kind of do that for anyone. But maybe there will be some cool explanation as to why they can't replicate it again and again. It was funny seeing Cisco be angry at Thawne, considering he did this all by himself and all the brains at Star Labs couldn't even do it once. I'm also looking forward to the explanation as to why they couldn't pull it off just yet and what that missing piece is. But in this episode, everyone, it was fairly cohesive, and that's what I really enjoyed about it. It was all very, very plot driven. There were a lot of reveals, a lot of kind of, mind-blowing moments almost that just made it really entertaining and engaging all of the way throughout. So this all began with that Mira, Iris, and Camila scene kind of liaising with Ava, the whole success is assured line being brought up every now and again, and that's when Cecile came in the room. She knocked. I was just thinking, does anyone else think like this? When she knocked on the door, she could have just easily walked in. I mean, I guess she was being polite, but she could have just walked in on that whole Miraverse conversation in the mirror with Ava. But either way, we had Cecile not really approving of Iris's attitude to the whole argument and situation with Barry, because it's like, well, if you really loved him, don't you want to kind of fix this? And on the actual Miraverse side of things, we had Iris about to destroy the mirror that Ava can control, and there was that button next to the mirror. And if you guys all saw the promo for this episode, they actually showcased what was in this room, and I was quite looking forward to seeing what Iris was discovering in this room. And as predicted, it was kind of this whole room in where these mirrors were mounted up on the wall, and they kind of like this CCTV camera recording display of the real world. And this is when Iris learned all about Ava's conversations with like Joseph McCulloch a couple of episodes back, and how all the time she spied on Iris, and just all of the origins of everything that kind of just happened up until now with Ava McCulloch. But finally, guys, Barry has been looking at Iris's odd behavior and how Iris just isn't Iris to him anymore. And I was finally waiting for that moment to happen, and it turns out he's been avoiding her for a whole week, hasn't even asked to come back to the house. Now, in his explanations to Cecile, he did drop once again, the whole multiverse not existing. I do wonder when they're going to find out that there still is a multiverse, because we have like the Earth 9 Titans Earth, we have like Earth 19, we have the Superman Returns Earth, we have a bunch of Earths still out there, but he ruled out a lot of things, even to the point of where he thought Martians could be impersonating Iris. But it all came down to Iris going to McCulloch Tech that evening, where she was pulled into the mirror by Ava. Now this got to the point of where Barry found that photo from Camila's camera showing that dimensional shift, and that is when Team Flash confronted Iris. Now this was all very interesting, and I didn't actually expect this twist, because that's when Barry used the prismatic prismatic scanner on Iris, yet it didn't work, and she actually flipped the whole situation round on Barry, and he was put in the pipeline. And I was really hoping at this moment, as interesting as these twists and turns were in this episode, I was like, please don't drag this out, please don't make Barry for the next episode and a half be stuck in the pipeline. And I'm just glad that they tackled it all within this episode, because usually with the way things go with storylines like this, but granted we are more towards the end of the season now, this would have had Barry in the pipeline till the next episode, and then what happened by the end of this episode would have been in like 2 episodes time. But that's what I really enjoy about what Eric Wallace is doing this season. Kind of having 2 separate storylines has allowed things like this to accelerate at a much faster pace, which yet again, as I said at the beginning of this review, allowed for a very engaging, consistent, and just maintaining main plot episode. But also, as we know from if you've seen this episode, Ava wanted to get out, and that is when Camila, Iris, and Chief Singh went to Argus, and they played a little flashback of how they got Barry to look like, a mirror dimension version of himself, because they swapped out that prismatic scanner for the little kind of metal tray that it was sitting in. I guess it had like a mirror reflection, so Ava could, do that. But either way, they went to see blood work, and what a pleasant surprise that was. And what I really liked about this, well, I liked this for quite a few things, even though he hasn't even changed his clothes from when he was caught. I did think, Argus, fair enough, you want to keep these people in, but you're not even gonna offer them a change of clothes. You got either way, let's move past that. This is where we get a little bit more of an explanation as to what properties, or who these mirror people are really, and that's when Iris reveals that they're reflections of themselves, which was a no-brainer, but they're faster and actually stronger than their human counterparts, which I think are details we didn't really know before, so that may still come into play with the other Mirrorverse versions. Well, it most certainly did as well with Iris versus Barry at the end of this episode. So they eventually explain the whole situation to Bloodwork with Ava McCulloch and how they need his blood, and I love that kind of expression from Bloodwork, saying, even in here, the world has a way of me playing the role of savior. He's still as delusional as ever with wanting to save, humankind from ever dying, and that was just a nice, throwback to the beginning of this season with how he viewed he could just save everyone, but it was, typically in the villainous kind of sense, not in the most or, best way you could go about it. And also it just kind of made me think, the more I look back at Bloodwork, I have thought there was nothing inherently wrong with him. He just wasn't all that interesting in retrospect, but in this moment it's like, hey, yeah, no, actually, Ramsey, Bloodwork, you're pretty cool, and I really like you. But anyway, moving swiftly onwards, that's when Mira Camila sacrifices herself to destroy the shield surrounding Ramsey's cell. I can't forget how they kept calling Ava like mother, which is, definitely a Bates Motel thing for me. But either way, Mira Camila's gone now. They're all inherently kind of following the orders, from their base code of Ava, but that's when an interesting thing for Iris, happened in this episode, because that's when Bloodwork got out, not before also, completely destroying Singh temporarily to power up a little bit, to just get a little bit of an energy booster. And this is where Bloodwork revealed that he can see in the Mirrorverse Iris that she does have a hesitation in following Ava's will, and that she has a modicum of her own will, not just the will of Ava. And this made Mirrorverse Iris a bit more interesting to me. I mean, don't get me wrong, it was interesting anyway, but it was being dragged out a bit more. I found her a bit irritating, but obviously she was meant to be deliberately irritating because it's not our Iris. But adding the whole aspect of that she wants to be alive when she revealed that to Bloodwork, I found that kind of splintering away from Ava, just adding a whole new layer to this replicated character of Iris. But, I did think, why the heck did Ramsey go back in his cell? And I suppose out of all the excuses CW shows give, this one was a half decent one, because Ramsey never thought that he would escape due to Argus's safety measures. So, that's kind of believable. Maybe he didn't want to attempt that, but he said himself that he's playing the long game. He said, but there's more than one way for me to be free, so let's just call this the long game. And there was a little bit of blood that Iris collected, and what I really liked about this, especially, I would just skip forward to this later, when Iris threw the blood on the mirror, there was still a little bit of blood left in that vial. So what I really like about that is that this does infer the return of Ramsey one day. Now, I don't think that will be in a whole half-season villain form or anything like that, but what I really do like about this is that, in comic books, villains don't really very often die. Of course they do, but they're always, put away in a similar situation to what Ramsey is like right now, and they break out again, and they come back, and the Flash or Batman or whoever runs into those villains again and again throughout various points in their vigilante or heroic careers. So, as what Ramsey teased here, I really like that. I whether he pops up for a 2-part special next season or something like that, I really do appreciate little details like this, because I guess his blood is out there in the world, and maybe if it trickles all of its way back from that vial to Argus and somehow lets him escape, or if that blood infects, I don't know, some host out there in some random Central City citizen person, and that person somehow orchestrates Ramsey's escape. I'm getting down a rabbit hole of theory right now, but that blood allows a lot of possibility to Ramsey. But anyway, moving onwards, guys, we had Cecile picking up that something was off even when they decided to put Barry in a pipeline and releases Barry, and that is when he arrives at the apartment and catches Mira Iris red-handed. Now, that is when, as we just kind of discussed with blood work, with relation to that vial of blood, she applies the blood to the mirror, and there was still some blood left in that vial. And this is where, out of nowhere, it kind of made me laugh, even though I found it really cool. Out of nowhere, she equips 2 mirror blades. I guess we're calling them mirror blades. And Barry uses what's left of his speed to narrowly kind of dodge this Mira Iris, but he was definitely getting shanked left, right, and center. And I really did find this moment really, really cool. This is kind of, adding even more icing onto the cake that was this episode, because, well, he was really getting mega shanked in this moment, impaled even, especially at that one part where he got impaled like either side of him. And to be honest, I found it pretty epic. Now, this is when the real Iris says to Ava, that she's still in love with her husband, and she, gets a bit annoyed with this, saying, no, I actually want to end him. And I do believe her when she says that. I think there is a bit of maybe low-key feelings there for Ava, but I do think that she does want to end him overall. But this was all just kind of a ploy to antagonize her, to distract the Mira Iris in the real world from killing Barry. However, I do feel like they should have maybe, in my mind anyway, come up with something a bit more creative here, because Ava was just buying into all of this, and I felt like it was so obvious what the real Iris was doing in the Mirrorverse world to Ava to cause that distraction. I don't know, a lot of you probably just didn't mind this at all. I didn't even really, but I'm just saying, I'm sure they could have thought of something a little bit better. This is when it branched onto something else, which I didn't really expect, which yet again didn't really sit right with me, because Barry appeals to the Mira Iris because a part of the real Iris's heart is in this Mirrorverse Iris, and of course there were little details of that sprinkled throughout and how she wants to be real. The only reason I find a little bit of issue with this is because I feel like this whole situation was flipped on its head way too fast. I'm not negating that maybe this Iris could have been persuaded to come round to being, nice and, even turn away from Ava, because she did have desires of being real and having, this own will of hers. But I just feel like, considering she was literally impaling and stabbing Barry left, right, and center a minute ago, to then just being like, oh, get Iris out, Barry, and I don't want to do this anymore. Granted that they did set the seeds of her own will up, it just felt, as I said, flipped on its head a bit too fast. By the way, it was still cool to witness all of this. Ava destroys the Mira Iris, who, as I said, keeps saying that she wanted to be real, and, she says that she feels alive, and that was a nice way for her to go out. As I keep reiterating, though, it was just a bit weird and too soon after constantly shanking Barry left, right, and center with all of those mirrors in the room. And this is when, with blood works blood, Ava steps out as the Mirror Master, or Mirror Mistress, whatever you want to freaking call it. I have to admit, I don't know if anyone else thought of this. I found this "look what you made me do" line a bit cringy. I don't know if that was meant to be a Taylor Swift reference, but it probably wasn't. But I don't know. I couldn't help but think of the song, where she goes, "Look what you made me do." I don't know. Moving forward, we have Barry versus Ava. He gets hit with that shard of mirror. And I really, really like this moment as well, though, with Ava, because she just seems so unhinged here in the real world. She seemed that way anyway, but I like how she didn't really want to kill the Flash. She's a bit more of a complicated villain compared to that of a character who just is being a villain for villainous sake. And that is when we had Barry waking up in that post-title credit scene, if you will, where he was all speed, healed up, and now in this moment I was really hoping that this would have been his last drop of speed that was spent here, because, you know, it was obvious that he was even surprised that he had all of his injuries healed. But I really thought with the watch flashing red that this was gonna be like, oh crap, like his watch would just blink out or some other entirely new color, and that would just be like, crap, you've lost your whole connection to the original Speed Force. But that didn't happen, and I get why it didn't happen at the same time, because we have got the Godspeed episode next week, and that does really look awesome, and Barry will need a little smidge of his speed there. But I feel like this would have been a good moment to sever his connection entirely. And that's when we had that moment at the end of the episode with Barry kind of leaning into the mirror, wanting to be close to Iris. It was a touching scene in a sense. I'm sure the West Ellen stans were all over this. I mean, they can't hear what each other was saying, and I think at some point it was getting a bit too cheese for me, but like either way, I appreciate that. It was a nice scene. Other than that though, guys, I haven't spoke about this at all because there really isn't much to say. Caitlin was in that little snow situation where she was in an ice coma hibernation, and she woke up. That's about it. I don't really have anything to say about that. Whatever. But that is the episode, guys. I thought it was a thoroughly interesting episode, and as I said, probably one of the best of the season so far. I have to think about that a bit more because there were a couple of episodes this season which I really feel like that stood out, but this one was, as I said at the very beginning of this breakdown, it was just engaging, it was cohesive, it had just quite a few twists and turns. The main villain, if you will, of part 2 is kind of out and about in the real world now. There was a lot of emotion in it. I just feel like I had everything that makes the Flash. Granted that he is losing the thing that makes him the Flash. But either way, guys, I would really love to hear your thoughts on this. Unfortunately, we only do have a couple of episodes left. We have Godspeed next week, which I'm very intrigued to see what's going on with that whole situation. But also, I just really want to see what's going on with this whole artificial Speed Force stuff. That's really got my, interest peaked. But yeah, did you really enjoy this episode? Let me know. Let me know your theories. Let me know what you thought of various elements. But other than that, like this video if you did enjoy it. Subscribe for more videos just like this. And I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.